Are you blind or just naturally this stupid? The screeching voice cut through the air like a jagged blade. Before I could blink, a wave of scalding coffee hit my chest, soaking through my vintage sweater and searing my skin. I stood frozen for a second, feeling the warmth turn into a sticky, humiliating mess. I looked up. Standing there was a girl, barely out of her teens, wearing a skirt that cost more than her maturity level and clutching an empty Starbucks cup. Chloe Harrington. I knew her name because I signed her internship papers 2 months ago. I also knew she was currently sleeping with my husband. "You ran into me, Chloe?" I said, my voice dangerously low. I wasn't screaming, but the sheer coldness in my tone made a few nearby employees stop in their tracks. "Apologize, now." Chloe let out a high-pitched mocking laugh. "Apologize to a pathetic street rat like you. Look at you. You're a walking eyesore. You just ruined my $3,500 silk blouse with your disgusting presence." "Your blouse." I took a predatory step forward, ignoring the coffee dripping from my hem. "You poured your drink on me. And trust me, you don't want to talk about the price of things you can't afford." Her face flushed a deep, ugly red. "How do you know my name? Have you been stalking the staff, you creep? I know everything that happens in this building," I whispered, leaning in so close she could see the fire in my eyes, "including the fact that you've been spending more time in the CEO's private lounge than in the legal department." Chloe's eyes widened, then she masked it with a smug, venomous grin. "Oh, so you've heard? Good. Then you know that Dominic, my Dominic, is the king of this castle. And I'm the queen. Which makes you absolutely nothing." "Arthur." "Get over here." The elderly security guard. Arthur hurried over his face, turning ghostly pale the moment he saw me. "Mrs. Stirs." "Arthur, don't!" I snapped my gaze, never leaving Chloe's. "The queen here wants to make a scene. Let her finish her performance." "Arthur, throw this trash out!" Chloe shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at my face. "She's threatening me. She's jealous because she's a nobody, and I'm about to become the most powerful woman in Aegis Dynamics once Dominic signs that $4.5 million merger today." "Ma'am, please." Arthur stammered, his voice trembling. "You don't understand who I understand perfectly," Chloe interrupted, turning her rage on the old man. "You're as useless as she is. Maybe you should both head to the unemployment line together." She grabbed my arm to shove me toward the door. That was her final mistake. In one swift motion, I grabbed her wrist and twisted it, forcing her to her knees. The lobby went silent. "Don't ever touch me again," I hissed. "You think Dominic Vance is your ticket to the top? You think he loves you? He told me his wife was a shrew, didn't he? That she was a cold, heartless statue." How do you know that?" She gasped, her face draining of color. "Because I'm the woman who built this empire while he was busy failing at everything else," I said, releasing her with a look of pure disgust. "I'm Vivian Sterling, and you're fired." I turned to Arthur, whose back was now straight as a rod. "Arthur, call my lawyer. Tell him to meet me on the 50th floor. And as for her, make sure she stays right here to watch her king fall." "Yes!" Chairperson Arthur shouted. I marched toward the executive elevators, my heart thundering with a lethal mix of betrayal and adrenaline. Every step was a drumbeat of war. I pressed my thumb to the biometric scanner. Access granted. Level 50. As the doors closed, the last thing I saw was Chloe Harrington collapsing onto the floor, her royal world shattered. "Hold on tight, Dominic," I whispered into the silence, "because I'm coming for blood." The elevator ride to the 50th floor was a cold, silent countdown to war. I stared at my reflection in the polished steel doors. I was a mess, stained with coffee and smelling of betrayal, but my eyes had never been clearer. The doors chimed, and I stepped into the executive suite like a storm breaking over a calm sea. "Mrs. Vance, I mean. Vivian?" Sarah, the receptionist, leaped to her feet. She dropped her phone, her mouth agape. "You're back, but Dominic said you were in Europe for—" "I don't care what he said, Sarah." I cut her off, my voice echoing through the glass hallways. "Open the boardroom doors, now." "But they're in the middle of the $4.5 million merger signing." He gave strict orders. He gave orders. I stopped and looked at her. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "In my building, on my floor. Open the doors. Sarah or you can go join your friend Chloe in the unemployment line." Sarah didn't hesitate another second. She swiped her card, and the heavy oak doors swung open. The room was a temple of corporate arrogance. At the head of the long mahogany table sat Dominic Vance, looking every bit the king of the world. He was laughing, sharing a joke with 3 wealthy investors as he held a fountain pen over a contract. "And that gentleman is why Aegis Dynamics is—" The words died in his throat. Dominic froze, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. The pen slipped from his hand, clattering onto the table. "Vivian," he stammered. What is the meaning of this? You're supposed to be in Zurich for your recovery." "Recovery?" I walked into the room, the scent of spilled coffee following me like a ghost. I didn't stop until I was standing right behind his chair. I leaned down, whispering just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Did you think 3 weeks in a Swiss retreat would be enough to make me forget how to read a balance sheet, Dominic?" The investors looked at each other confused. One of them, an old friend of my father's, cleared his throat. "Dominic, you said your wife was mentally unfit to handle the business right now." "Mentally unfit." I let out a sharp, cold laugh that made Dominic flinch. I slammed my hand onto the table right on top of the contract he was about to sign. "Is that what you told them while you were busy transferring $4.5 million of company funds into a private account in the Caymans?" Dominic scrambled to stand up, but I shoved his shoulder back down, pinning him. "Vivian, you're making a scene. You're clearly exhausted. Let's go home and talk." "Home." I grabbed his silk tie and yanked his head back until he had to look me in the eye. "You mean the penthouse that my father bought, the one where you've been hosting Chloe Harrington while I was away?" "No, Dominic, we aren't going home." The room erupted in whispers. The investors' faces shifted from confusion to disgust. "You're lying." Dominic hissed through his trembling hands, told a different story. "You have no proof. I have the forensic audit, the IP logs from your private computer, and a detective's report that would make a sailor blush," I said, releasing his tie with a flick of my wrist. I turned to the board. "Gentlemen, this merger is a fraud. He's skimming. If you sign that paper, you're not investing in Aegis. You're funding his escape plan." The investors didn't wait. They stood up in unison, grabbing their coats. "Wait, Bill Marcus. Don't listen to her," Dominic yelled, but it was useless. The door slammed shut behind them. The silence that followed was suffocating. Dominic turned to me, his eyes wild with a mixture of fear and hatred. "You just ruined everything that was $4.5 million. "No, Dominic," I said, walking to the window to look out at the city I owned. "I saved $4.5 million, and I'm just getting started. I didn't come here to divorce you. I came here to bury you." Dominic slumped into his leather chair, the weight of the silence in the boardroom pressing down on him. The arrogance that usually defined his posture had evaporated, replaced by a frantic, twitchy energy. He looked like a cornered rat, eyes darting between me and the exit. "Vivian, listen to me." He started, his voice cracking. He reached out to grab my hand, but I stepped back as if his touch were toxic. "I did it for us. The company was stagnating. I needed leverage, a way to expand. By stealing from the employee's retirement fund, I interrupted, my voice flat and devoid of any warmth. By funneling money into an account that only has your name on it. Tell me, Dominic was Chloe Harrington, part of the expansion plan, too. At the mention of her name, his face twitched. Chloe is nothing. A lapse in judgment. She meant nothing to me. That's the most pathetic thing you've said all day. I spat. You traded 15 years of my life and my father's legacy for a girl who can't even differentiate between a liability and an asset. But then again, neither can you. Because today, Dominic, you are the biggest liability I have. I walked over to his desk and picked up his desk nameplate, Dominic Vance, CEO. I turned it over in my hand before letting it drop into the trash can with a hollow thud. What are you going to do? He whispered, his voice trembling. I've already done it, I said, leaning over the table. While you were busy picking out jewelry for your mistress, I revoked your access to every corporate account. I've frozen the Cayman funds. And right now there are 2 federal agents waiting in the lobby to discuss your creative accounting. His eyes went wide with terror. The police! Vivian, no. We can settle this. If I go to prison, the company stock will plummet. You'll lose everything too. I'd rather own a pile of ashes than a kingdom built on your lies, I countered. The door opened, and Dr. Marcus Thorne, my oldest friend, and the company's head of surgery stepped in. He looked at Dominic with a mixture of pity and contempt, then handed me a thick manila envelope. The board has been notified, Vivian, Marcus said, his voice steady. They've called an emergency session for noon. They're ready to vote him out. You traitor! Dominic screamed at Marcus, lunging out of his chair. I didn't even flinch. I simply stepped between them. Sit down, Dominic. He stopped, stunned by the sheer authority in my command. He looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time, he saw the woman who had actually been running the show behind the scenes. The shrew was gone. The lioness was in charge. Marcus, please escort Mr. Vance to the security office, I said, not taking my eyes off my husband. I believe he has some personal items to collect, and tell Arthur to make sure he doesn't take anything that belongs to Aegis, not even a paperclip. Vivian, please, don't do this. Dominic pleaded, tears actually welled in his eyes. I love you. We can start over. Love? I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. You don't know the meaning of the word. You love the power I gave you. You love the money I made for you. But you never loved me. I turned my back on him and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. The Chicago rain was blurring the world outside, but inside, everything was finally clear. Get him out of my sight, I ordered. As Marcus led a sobbing, broken Dominic away, I felt a strange sense of emptiness. The man I had loved was a ghost. The man who just left was a criminal. I sat in the CEO chair, my father's chair, and took a deep breath. The battle for the company was won, but the war for my life was just beginning. I pulled the manila envelope toward me and opened it. Inside were the divorce papers I had drafted months ago. One down, I whispered, signing the first page with a steady hand. One to go. One. The office felt cavernous after they dragged Dominic out. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, vibrating with the echoes of his pathetic pleas. I looked down at my hands. They were steady, but the skin beneath my fingernails felt tight. A physical manifestation of the stress I'd been suppressing for months. A soft knock at the door broke the tension. Arthur, the security guard from the lobby, stood there. He looked smaller than he had 10 years ago, his uniform a little too loose around his shoulders. Mrs. Sterling, he asked hesitantly. The The young lady is still in the lobby. She's demanding to see Mr. Vance. She's making quite a scene. I stood up, smoothing out my damp sweater. Is she now? Thank you, Arthur. I'll be down in a moment. And Arthur? Yes, ma'am. Thank you for recognizing me today. It's good to know some people in this building still have a memory for the truth. He gave a small, dignified nod. Your father would be proud, Vivian. He always said you were the real backbone of this place. I waited for the door to close before I allowed a single tear to escape. I wiped it away instantly. Pride was a luxury I couldn't afford yet. I grabbed my blazer, the one Sarah had fetched from my private locker, and threw it over my shoulders. The coffee stain was hidden, but the burn on my skin still stung. Good. I wanted to feel it. When I stepped out of the elevator into the lobby, the atmosphere was electric. Employees were whispering in clusters, their eyes glued to the center of the room. Chloe Harrington was screaming at a junior security officer, her face distorted with rage. Do you know who I am? She shrieked, her voice hitting a glass-shattering register. I am Dominic Vance's fiancé. When he hears how you've treated me, you'll be scrubbing toilets in the bus station. Fiancé, I called out, my voice cutting through her tantrum like a cold front. That's a rapid promotion, Chloe. Last I heard, you were just a failing intern with a penchant for spilled coffee. Chloe spun around. Seeing me in a sharp, tailored blazer, the true image of the chairperson, seemed to hit her like a physical blow. She staggered back, her eyes darting to the elevators. Where's Dominic? Why isn't he answering his phone? Dominic is currently occupied with the authorities, I said, walking toward her with measured steps. It turns out the Queen's throne was built on embezzled pension funds. The FBI tends to take an interest in that sort of thing. You're lying, she yelled, though her voice lacked conviction. He loves me. He's going to protect me. Protect you. I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. I stopped inches from her, so close she had to look up to meet my gaze. Chloe, the moment the handcuffs touched his wrists, he blamed everything on you. He told the agents you were the one who suggested the offshore accounts. He called you a greedy distraction. Her face went from red to a deathly translucent white. He wouldn't. He did. Men like Dominic don't love people, Chloe. They love shields. And you were the perfect, shiny little shield to hide his crimes behind. I leaned in closer, my voice a whisper. Did you really think a man who would betray a wife of 15 years would be loyal to a girl he met at a Starbucks? She looked around the lobby. No one was looking at her with pity. They were looking at her with disgust. The power she thought she possessed had vanished, leaving her as nothing more than a girl with a ruined reputation and a potential conspiracy charge. Arthur, I said, not taking my eyes off her, please escort Miss Harrington to the exit and make sure she leaves her corporate badge and laptop at the desk. She won't be needing them where she's going. You can't do this, Chloe sobbed as Arthur took her arm. I have rights. In this building, I am the law, I replied coldly. And my first decree is that you are never to set foot on a Sterling property again. As they led her out, the lobby erupted into applause. I didn't join in. I just turned and walked toward the windows, watching the police cruisers pull up to the curb. The first half of my vengeance was complete. Now I had a company to save and a heart to bury. The heavy mahogany door of the CEO office clicked shut, muffled by the thick carpet that I had paid for with my first major contract 5 years ago. I stood in the center of the room, the silence now so loud it was ringing in my ears. Outside, the sirens of the police cruisers were fading into the Chicago traffic, taking Dominic and his shattered ego toward a holding cell. I walked to the desk, his desk, and saw a framed photo of us from our 10th anniversary in Tuscany. We looked so happy. I looked so naive. With a flick of my wrist, I swiped the frame off the desk. It hit the floor, the glass shattering into a million jagged diamonds. Sarah? I said into the intercom, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Yes, chairperson. Her voice was trembling. She had seen the fall of the king, and she knew the queen was back for blood. Call a full board meeting for 8:00 a.m. tomorrow, and tell the janitorial staff I want this office cleared by tonight. Every suit, every cigar, every lingering scent of Dominic Vance is to be burned or trashed. Am I clear? Crystal, ma'am. I sat down in the executive chair. It was still warm from his body, a sensation that made my skin crawl. I quickly stood up and moved to the small lounge sofa near the window. I couldn't sit there yet, not until the air was purified. A knock came at the door. Dr. Marcus Thorne entered carrying 2 glasses and a bottle of high-end scotch. He didn't ask. He just poured. You look like you've been through a war, Viv, he said softly, handing me a glass. I haven't been through it, Marcus. I started it. I replied, taking a long sip. The liquid burned my throat, a welcome distraction from the burn of the coffee still stinging my chest. How bad is it? Give it to me straight. Marcus sighed, sitting opposite me. The $4.5 million is just the tip of the iceberg. I've had my team look over the equipment procurement files for the last 6 months. He wasn't just skimming. He was buying refurbished, low-grade surgical tools and billing the company for top-tier German engineering. He was risking lives, Vivian. He was risking the patients at Aegis to fund his and Chloe's lifestyle. My grip tightened on the glass until my knuckles turned white. He risked the patients. He did. If a single one of those tools had failed during a procedure, the lawsuits would have buried us before the FBI even got involved. The rage, which I thought had peaked in the lobby, surged back with a new icy intensity. Betraying me was one thing, stealing money was another. But endangering the people who trusted our hospitals? That was a death sentence. I want every single one of those contracts traced, I hissed. I want the suppliers blacklisted, and I want Dominic charged with reckless endangerment on top of the embezzlement. Vivian, take a breath, Marcus said gently. You've won. He's gone. The board is terrified of you, and the staff is already celebrating. I haven't won until he has nothing left. I snapped, standing up and pacing the length of the room. He thought he could play me. He thought he could call me a shrew and hide behind my hard work while he played house with a child. I want him to watch from a prison cell as I turn this company into something he could never even dream of. I stopped at the window looking out at the city lights. I could see my reflection, a woman in a ruined sweater and a borrowed blazer, her eyes hard and cold like flint. Chloe mentioned a divorce, I said, turning back to Marcus. She said he was divorcing me today. Marcus looked down at his glass. I found the papers in his top drawer when I was looking for the audit files. He had them signed and ready. He was going to serve you at dinner tonight. I felt a hollow laugh escape my lips. At dinner? How romantic. He was going to offer me a settlement from my own bank account. I walked back to the desk, picked up the phone, and dialed my personal attorney. Alan, it's Vivian. Scrap the divorce papers I sent you earlier. I don't want a standard filing anymore. I want a full-scale asset recovery lawsuit. I want every penny, every gift, and every suit he ever bought with my money. I want him in rags. I hung up without waiting for an answer. What now? Marcus asked. Now, I said, looking at the shattered photo on the floor. I go home, I take a shower to wash off the smell of cheap coffee and betrayal, and tomorrow I show this city why you should never, ever cross a Sterling. The penthouse felt like a tomb. As I stepped through the door, the silence of the Chicago skyline pressed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, mocking the home I thought I had built. Every piece of Italian furniture and every expensive painting now looked like a monument to a dead relationship. I walked into the master bedroom. On the nightstand sat a bottle of vintage Cristal in a bucket of melted ice. 2 glasses stood ready. Propped against a velvet box was a handwritten note. To our new beginning, my love, D. I felt a surge of bile rise in my throat. This was the celebration Chloe had mentioned. This was where he planned to serve me the divorce papers and toast to his new life using my father's money. I opened the velvet box. Inside was a diamond bracelet, one I recognized from an invoice at Aegis. He had billed the company for specialized surgical sensors to buy his mistress a trinket. "You arrogant, pathetic coward," I whispered. I didn't cry. Tears were for the weak, and I had been weak for far too long. I went to the bathroom, stripped off the coffee-stained sweater, and stepped into the shower. I turned the water up until it was almost scalding, scrubbing my skin until it was raw. I wanted to wash away the smell of the lobby, the cloying scent of Chloe's perfume, and the lingering filth of a man who never existed. As I wrapped myself in a silk robe, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. "You think you've won, you bitter bitch. Dominic will be out by morning. He has friends you don't know about. He actually loves me. Sleep well in your empty bed." I stared at the screen. Chloe. Even after the humiliation, she was clinging to a delusion. She didn't realize that in Dominic's world, people were only tools. Once a tool was broken, he threw it away. I dialed Arthur at the front desk of the office. "Arthur, it's Vivian. Did Miss Harrington leave the premises?" "She did, ma'am. She's driving that white Porsche company car. Call the police." I said, my voice as cold as the ice in the champagne bucket. "Report it stolen. Tell them the driver is a disgruntled former employee who is likely intoxicated. I want her intercepted before she leaves the city limits." "With pleasure, ma'am." I blocked the number and walked into Dominic's walk-in closet. It was a temple of vanity filled with $5,000 suits and handmade shoes. I grabbed a heavy-duty trash bag and began ripping the suits off their hangers. Rip, toss. Rip, toss. I wasn't just clearing a closet. I was erasing a ghost. I dragged the bags to the service elevator and sent them down to the incinerator. I went back to the bedroom, picked up the champagne bottle, and poured a glass. It was crisp, expensive, and tasted like the end of an era. I sat on the balcony looking at the city. My bed was empty, yes, but for the first time in years, it was mine. I opened my laptop and pulled up the GPS logs for the company car Chloe was driving. My eyes narrowed. She wasn't going to a hotel. She was heading to a private warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a location not listed in any of our corporate files. "A new beginning, indeed," I muttered, watching the police sirens flicker in the distance. "But not for you, Dominic. Not for you." The warehouse was located in a desolate industrial strip near the south side, a place where the city's glittering lights didn't bother to reach. I pulled my SUV into the shadows across the street, the engine idling quietly. My heart was a drum beating with a rhythm of pure, unadulterated loathing. A white Porsche, the stolen company car, was parked haphazardly near a rusted loading dock. Beside it stood Chloe, pacing frantically and shouting into her phone. She looked small, panicked, and utterly out of her element in this wasteland of concrete and corrugated metal. "I don't care what the lawyer said," she screamed. "Dominic told me the keys to the secondary vault were here. I need that cash now, cash." So that was it. Dominic hadn't just been skimming for a lifestyle. He was hoarding an escape fund. I stepped out of my car, the cold Chicago wind whipping my hair across my face. I didn't hide. I walked straight toward her, my boots crunching on the gravel. Chloe spun around, her phone slipping from her hand and clattering onto the pavement. "You..." she gasped, her eyes bulging. "How did you GPS is a wonderful thing, Chloe. Especially on a car that doesn't belong to you, I said, stopping a few feet away. You're looking for the vault. Let me save you the trouble. Dominic changed the codes 3 days ago. He wasn't planning on taking you with him. You're lying. He wouldn't leave me, she shrieked, though her lip was trembling. He already did, I countered, stepping closer. The moment the feds walked in, you became a liability. Did you really think you were his partner? You were his fall girl. If you open that warehouse, you're not going to find a future. You're going to find the evidence that will put you in a cell right next to him. I don't believe you. She lunged for the warehouse door, fumbling with the keycard. I grabbed her arm, spinning her around. The rage I had been nursing all day finally boiled over. Look at yourself. You threw away your career and your dignity for a man who used you to hide his theft. He risked people's lives with faulty equipment. Chloe, did he tell you that? Did he tell you that children could have died because he wanted to buy you a diamond bracelet? She froze her face, turning a ghastly shade of gray. I didn't know about the equipment. He said it was just taxes, creative accounting. There is nothing creative about manslaughter, I hissed. Blue and red lights suddenly cut through the darkness, reflecting off the metal walls. 3 police cruisers pulled into the lot, tires screeching. Step away from the vehicle. Hands in the air, a voice boomed over a loudspeaker. Chloe crumbled, falling to her knees and sobbing into her hands. I stood tall, my silhouette framed by the flashing lights. I watched as the officers moved in, cuffing her and reading her the rights she had so carelessly forfeited. One of the officers, a sergeant I recognized from the hospital's security board, walked up to me. Mrs. Sterling, we found the vehicle, and it looks like she was trying to break into this facility. Thank you, Sergeant, I said, my voice as steady as a mountain. This warehouse contains property belonging to Aegis Dynamics. I'd like it sealed as a crime scene immediately. I believe you'll find the rest of the embezzled $4.5 million and the faulty medical supplies inside. I looked at Chloe as they hauled her into the back of a squad car. She looked like a broken doll. No pity moved in my chest, only a cold, hard sense of justice. Vivian, she yelled from the window. He'll come for you. He still has the offshore codes. No, Chloe, I whispered to the wind. He has nothing, because I'm the one who changed the encryption. I turned my back on the sirens and the girl walking toward my car. The snake's nest had been found. Now it was time to burn it down. 8:00 a.m. The air in the Aegis Dynamics boardroom was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and cheap fear. The 12 members of the board sat in silence, their eyes fixed on the empty chair at the head of the table. They had spent the night watching the news, Dominic's arrest, the warehouse raid, the scandal unfolding like a bloody car crash. I walked in precisely on the hour. I wasn't wearing a coffee-stained sweater today. I wore a tailored black power suit, my hair pulled back into a sharp, lethal ponytail. I didn't sit. I stood at the head of the table, leaning forward until my shadows stretched over them. Good morning, gentlemen, I said. My voice was a low, resonant hum that made several men flinch. I assume you've all seen the morning headlines. Aegis Dynamics is currently the lead story on every major network. Vivian, Arthur Sterling, no relation, just a man who had survived on the board by being a sycophant, cleared his throat. This is a catastrophe. The stock is down 12%. The investors are fleeing. We need to issue a statement. We need to defend Dominic until... Defend him. I slammed a thick file onto the table. The sound was like a gunshot. Dominic Vance is a thief, a liar, and a man who endangered every patient in our network for the price of a mistress's trinkets. Anyone in this room who wants to defend him can leave now, and I'll have the FBI waiting for you in the hallway. The room went deathly quiet. I have spent the last 12 hours with forensic accountants. I continued pacing the length of the room like a wolf in a cage. The $4.5 million was just the beginning. Dominic had a network of silent partners right here on this board who looked the other way while he bypassed safety protocols for the new surgical wing. Marcus. Dr. Marcus Thorne stood up, his face grim. He threw a series of photos onto the monitors. These are the refurbished valves Dominic installed in the pediatric unit last month. They were rated for scrap metal. If Vivian hadn't stopped the merger and seized the warehouse last Mao, we would have been burying children by next week. Gasps rippled through the room. The men who had been Dominic's golf buddies suddenly couldn't look me in the eye. I am not here to ask for your permission, I hissed, leaning over Arthur Sterling. I am here to take back what is mine. This company was founded by my father on the principles of integrity. Dominic turned it into a personal piggy bank, and you all let him do it because the dividends were high. What do you want, Vivian? One of the younger board members asked, his voice trembling. Resignations, I replied. I want the letters of every person who sat on the audit committee on my desk by noon, and I want a unanimous vote to appoint me as chairperson and CEO with absolute authority to restructure. Absolute authority? That's unprecedented, Arthur protested. I leaned in my face, inches from his. What's unprecedented is a CEO sleeping with an intern while stealing $4.5 million from his own employees' pensions. You have two choices. You vote for me, or I release the private emails I found on the server this morning. The ones where you, Arthur asked Dominic to hide your personal gambling debts in the marketing budget. Arthur's face turned a translucent white. He slowly raised his hand. One by one, the other hands followed. Unanimous, Marcus whispered. Good, I said, straightening my blazer. Now get out, all of you, except Marcus. I have a company to save, and I don't have time for cowards. As they filed out, their heads bowed, I finally sat in the chair. It felt cold. It felt right. I looked at Marcus. Is the press conference ready? I asked. In 10 minutes, Viv. The world is waiting. Good, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. Let's give them a show. The lights in the press room were blinding a sea of white flashes that felt like a firing squad. For years, I had stayed in the shadows, the silent architect of an empire, while Dominic basked in the spotlight I had built for him. Today, the world wasn't seeing the supportive wife. They were seeing the woman who owned the room. I stepped up to the podium. 100 microphones leaned in like hungry vipers. Mrs. Sterling, is it true the CEO was arrested for crimes against his own patients? Vivian, how did you catch him? Is the company filing for bankruptcy? I raised my hand, and the room fell into a sudden suffocating silence. I didn't look like a victim. I wore a tailored black suit that cost more than Dominic's bail, and my eyes were hard enough to crack glass. Aegis Dynamics is not just a company. It is my father's legacy, I began, my voice projecting with a cold, absolute authority. Dominic Vance was a guest in this house, and he chose to burn it down from the inside. He didn't just steal money. He stole trust. He replaced life-saving medical equipment with scrap metal to fund a lifestyle of decadence and infidelity. But the fire he started didn't destroy us. It only burned away the dead weight. I looked directly into the lens of the main camera. I knew Dominic was watching from a small, flickering screen in a holding cell. I wanted him to see my face calm, powerful, and entirely untouched by his betrayal. As of this morning, $3.8 million has been recovered from a hidden warehouse. The board has unanimously appointed me as chairperson and CEO. We are not just fixing our balance sheets, we are purging a cancer. Every faulty piece of equipment has been seized. Every pension penny will be returned. The era of Aegis being a playground for a thief's ego is over. What about the divorce? A reporter from a tabloid yelled. And the intern, I leaned into the microphone, a sharp, predatory smile touching my lips. The intern was a symptom of a much larger disease called mediocrity. Dominic Vance thought he could replace a diamond with a piece of cheap glass. He was wrong. The divorce is final, and as for the intern, she is currently learning that in the real world, company cars are not toys for disgruntled thieves. I walked off the stage before they could lob another question. My heart was thundering, but not with fear. It was the rhythm of a hunter who had finally cornered her prey. In the hallway, Dr. Marcus Thorne was waiting, his face pale as he looked at a tablet. Vivian, that was incredible. But we have a problem. Dominic's lawyer is on line 1. He's offering a deal. Dominic has another $1.2 million stashed in a secondary offshore account. He'll give up the codes if you agree to drop the reckless endangerment charges. I stopped walking. The air around me seemed to freeze. He wants to bargain with the lives he put at risk. He thinks he can buy his way out of the heavy time. Marcus said, looking at me expectantly. It's over $1 million, Viv. That could fund the entire new pediatric wing. I stared at the wall for a long moment. I could feel the ghost of the coffee stain on my chest, the burn of the humiliation in the lobby, and the sickening memory of his lies. Tell his lawyer. The answer is no. I said, my voice like a serrated blade. No, Vivian. That's a lot of money to leave on the table. I don't want his blood money, Marcus, and I don't want his deals. I want him to rot. I want him to have the maximum sentence for every single life he endangered. I want him to sit in that cell for 20 years, knowing that I found the rest of the money without him. I want him to watch me rebuild this empire into something he could never even dream of. I turned and headed toward my new office. The anger was no longer a fire that burned me. It was a weapon I had learned to wield. And Marcus. I paused at the door. That white Porsche Chloe was driving. Once the police are done with it, have it crushed. Turn it into a cube of scrap metal and send it to her jail cell. I want her to have a souvenir of the royalty she thought she had earned. I walked into my office and looked at the Chicago skyline. The city was gray, but my future had never been clearer. Tomorrow, a new desk would arrive, and for the first time in years, the seat at the head of the table would be filled by someone who actually deserved it. 3 months later, the Chicago winter had settled in, wrapping the city in a sharp, unforgiving chill. I stood in my new office on the 50th floor, the same room where I had once yanked Dominic's tie and promised to bury him. The mahogany furniture was gone, replaced by minimalist steel glass and white marble. It was clean. It was cold. It was mine. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a notification from my legal team. The sentencing was over. Dominic Vance, 18 years. Chloe Harrington, 4 years, I read aloud. The words felt like a final seal on a long, grueling chapter. 18 years. By the time Dominic walked out of those iron gates, he would be an old man with nothing but the memory of a woman he was too stupid to value. A knock at the door brought me back to the present. Dr. Marcus Thorne walked in, carrying a thin tablet and wearing a genuine smile, something I hadn't seen much of lately. The quarterly reports are in chairperson, he said, sliding the tablet onto the marble surface. Trust is up. Patient satisfaction is at an all-time high since we overhauled the equipment procurement process. And the $4.5 million between the seized assets and the insurance payout, we've recovered every cent, plus interest. I took a sip of my black coffee. No sugar, no cream, just like my outlook on life. And the pediatric wing opening next week, Marcus replied. We're naming it after your father. It's what he would have wanted, Viv. I nodded, feeling a rare moment of peace. The rage that had fueled me for months hadn't disappeared. It had simply been distilled into a quiet, unwavering strength. I had survived the betrayal, the humiliation of the lobby, and the crumbling of my marriage. I hadn't just survived, I had conquered. There's one more thing, Marcus added, his tone shifting. A letter came for you. From the county jail. He handed me a crinkled envelope. The return address was familiar. I didn't need to open it to know it was from Chloe. I could almost smell the desperation through the paper. I opened it anyway, curious to see the final gasps of a dying ego. Vivian, please. I didn't know the half of what he was doing. I'm rotting in here. My parents won't speak to me. Dominic won't take my calls. You have everything now. Can't you find it in your heart to help me get a reduced sentence? I'm only 20. My life is over. I stared at the frantic, loopy handwriting. In your heart. She thought I still had a heart for people like her. I walked over to the sleek industrial shredder near my desk and fed the paper into the slot. The machine hummed for a second, turning her pleas into meaningless confetti. Is everything all right? Marcus asked. Perfectly, I replied, just clearing out the last of the trash. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the frozen Chicago River. Below the city was moving people rushing to their jobs, living their lives. Among them were the employees of Aegis Dynamics, whose futures were now secure because I refused to be a victim. I remembered the girl in the coffee-stained sweater standing in the lobby, trembling with a fury she didn't know how to use. That girl was dead. In her place stood a woman who knew the exact price of loyalty and the terrifying cost of betrayal. Dominic had called me a shrew. He had called me cold. He was right. I was as cold as the steel in this building and just as hard to break. He had tried to steal my father's legacy, but all he did was remind me that I was a Sterling. And Sterlings don't break. We rebuild. I turned back to my desk and sat in the iron-framed chair. I had a board meeting in 10 minutes, a merger to finalize, and 1,000 lives to protect. The battle was over. The empire was restored. And as I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the monitor, I didn't see a woman who had been cheated on. I saw a queen who had finally reclaimed her throne. I picked up the phone. Sarah Send in the first department head. We have work to do. The door opened, and I didn't look back. I only looked forward. Life's too short to waste on people who do you dirty. Don't cry over a betrayal, just level up so hard that they become completely irrelevant. The best revenge is winning big and leaving them stuck in the past where they belong. Thanks for watching Vivian's journey all the way to the end. If you enjoyed her comeback, hit that like button and drop a comment below to let me know what you think. Don't forget to follow for more savage stories coming your way soon.